So, financial disagreements are one of the leading sources of stress in relationships. But hey, they don't have to be. So, in today's episode, we're going to be diving into some ways for couples to overcome financial disagreements with Darla Bishop. Now, whether it's conflicting spending habits, differing financial goals, or just the challenge of staying on the same page, Darla's expert insights will help you and your partner turn money from a source of tension into a tool for building a stronger, more united future. Hey guys, I'm Brad Nelson, founder of A Debt Free Dad. Welcome to today's show. I paid off about $45,000 in debt, have been debt free now for more than 11 years outside of my mortgage. I've also been fortunate to help thousands of other people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars with the work that we do here at Debt Free Dad. Now, after listening to this episode, if you are ready to take your finances a step further, you're ready to start taking action, you're ready to start feeling less financial stress, you want to save more money, you want to get out of debt. And seriously, guys, we can show you how to do that and start seeing some amazing results in just as little as 30 to 60 days. We're going to be sharing an awesome resource on how you can get started with that later on in today's show. So, hi, Darla. Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast. So glad that you are joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to talk to you about this really important topic.
Yes, absolutely. So can you share quick, Darla, how you even got into this line of work of very similar to what we do here at Debt Free Dad is help people with their personal finances, and where did this begin with you?
It began when I realized, probably as a young teenager, that my life would be a lot easier if we just had a little more money. The adults in my life were actually doing really good, were very good stewards of what they had. They just didn't have enough.
Yeah.
And when I went to college, I was blessed to have a full scholarship from the Gates Millennium Scholarship Program.
Wow.
Although I was fully intending, I really thought I was going to have to work my way through college. This scholarship gave me a whole new world. It meant that I could choose to work or not, or I could work just a little bit to have pocket money versus expecting to be working to pay for books and tuition. And so what I did with that extra time that I found is I started reading books about money because I had a classmate who drove a Range Rover, and his parents somehow got him special permission to get a staff parking pass, which was not allowed. There were no student passes on our campus. But this student, through whatever means his parents were able to provide to the university, worked out a parking pass so that his Range Rover could park right outside of our dorm.
Wow.
And luckily, this person is a dear, wonderful person, and his parents raised him so well, and one of my favorite people in life. But I remember thinking, if I could get here and this dude with the Range Rover is here, I'm smart enough to figure out the money part. And so
Yeah.
I started reading books. We had 7 libraries on campus, and I found all the money books that they would let me check out. And I started reading books about money. And over the last 15, 20 years, I've read more than 100 books. And part of it was I was so frustrated about some of the things that were missing from these books. Very few of them told me, as someone who had very little context, about what to do with the money once I had some. Because the fact that I was going to college, the fact that I was going to have this network and a career meant I was going to have a different type of money than what the parents and adults around me had growing up. And then I didn't have any context for what that really meant.
Yeah.
So they didn't tell me where to start and where to go next. They didn't give me any of those decision trees. So I put that in my book, How to Afford Everything. The other piece that really used to burn my biscuits is here I am. I either purchased the book or I got it from the library. And one of the first things you read when you open up the book is you're in a bad financial situation because you're dumb, you're stupid, and you have poor self-control. And I'm like, wait, hold up. No, that's not who I am. Or they'd later in the book, it'd say, well, the only way to get ahead is you have to tell your family, your friends, no, you don't loan any money, you don't help anyone. And that was not a reality for me. So I had to figure out how to balance, okay, how do I get myself stable while also helping my mom and my siblings when they need it and making that all work. And so I wrote the book I needed. And it was easy to write because I had been the de facto, hey, you actually have money. Can you show me how to make a budget? Or I just started a new job. How does this retirement account stuff work?
Right.
Or I got inheritance and it's not a lot of money, but what should I do with it? And that I kind of became that person in family and friends. So I actually came up with a coaching system. And then after so many years of using it, when I was ready to sit down and write a book, I turned the coaching system into the book.
Yeah, very cool. So over the years, like how many people have you been able to help with their finances and what does that look like?
In a formal coaching setting, probably about 20.
Okay.
But advice and workshops, and
Yeah.
it's hundreds because I'm a college professor. One of the things I do by day is I'm a college professor, and so I'm always offering to do free money workshops because I know that learning about money at that stage in my life is probably what helped me change the complete path that my
Yeah.
financial life was on because I was broke, right? When you can get to a broke person, but you know who's gonna have money later and teach them a couple of those good habits while they have a little bit of money and get them to make those mistakes early where the mistake doesn't cost a ton of money, then you can set them up for really a beautiful, peaceful, bright financial future.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's one of the things we're very passionate about here at Every Dad. And I'm so glad to have you on here because you're here to talk about a very probably tough topic for a lot of couples out there. And you mentioned like how you were raised with money. When we come together in a relationship and we're mashing these two financial experiences together. And they're not always the same.
Mhm.
Immediately, a lot of disagreements can happen and a lot of financial mindsets. There's just, you can be speaking almost two different languages when you start talking about the subject of money. You're going to share some great tips here today, but from just a basic level, from an educational standpoint, like where do we need to understand, like when we come together as a couple, even before we consider something like marriage or even we get serious in relationships, and like where do we even begin to navigate such a complicated subject and honestly a very emotional subject for most people?
Well, part of it is we don't realize we're actually having money conversations all the time because we don't necessarily label them or tag them in our brain as money conversations. But anytime you're working together to decide how you're going to date, what types of things you're going to do together, how much it costs, how much time you can put into that. Anytime you're deciding, do we take a trip? How will we pay for it? How will we split it? If you are ever on that long car ride and you're kind of daydreaming together about, well, what kind of house will we live in? And how many kids will we have, right? Those are actually all money conversations because
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're sharing with one another what your wishes, your desires, your values are. And so once you're actually sitting down and having an explicit conversation about the money part, you can say, well, look, if we said that we want to have this size family, if we said we want to be able to vacation in this particular way, if we said we don't want to be stressed, how do we need to make sure our money is lined up to have that life?
Yeah. And so how do people get there? Because I think me working with a lot of people over the years, I've been doing this almost an entire decade now. And I think there's a lot of people who have these dreams and they have these aspirations, they have these wishes, so to speak, even as an individual or even as a family, but they don't really have any clear direction on how to do that or to navigate that. What do you recommend to couples like in that basic, hey, if this is the life you want, like where do they get started with the first step?
There's kind of it's a two-part is one, what are the values you're after, right? So if we want this kind of lifestyle, what does that actually mean and why is it? Because sometimes, and I had a person joke with me saying, well, how do I convince my wife I can get a boat? And I was like, well, tell me and tell her why you want the boat. Do you want the boat because you that's when you feel most at peace, when you're on that lake, when you're fishing? Do you want the boat because every time you're on a boat, you're surrounded by all the people you love, your siblings, your parents you don't get to see as much, all the kids and the nieces and nephews? What is it about having the boat that you're after? Because maybe we can create that peace without the boat at all. Maybe we just make people come over for potlucks. Maybe we actually go take trips to visit your siblings and have family parties. And so, what is it that you're really after and get it down to that basic? And then the second part, and this is the part that's probably a little bit harder, is how are we spending our money? Because it turns out the very first thing I do with anyone I'm coaching is to say, okay, I don't need you to write me a budget. I actually need you to give me a 90-day report of where your money went.
Yes, I love that. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah,
People are just like, "How do I budget?" And it's like, "Wait, you're no, we ain't gonna start there."
we're not starting there.
Yeah,
Where'd your money go? And
that's
as
right.
we if we look at the last 3 months, did your money go to the things that were really important to you, or did they go to BS? And did they go to the things that are helping you achieve or get closer to that vision you have for your family and for yourself? Great. If they didn't, all right, how do we make different choices? How do we plan around those things that are inevitably going to come up in a way that they don't take you completely off your track?
Now you bring up a great example, like a boat. That's a pretty large purchase, and it could be anything. But like the whole word compromise comes to mind right away. How do we get away from like this whole resentment of, well, if you get that, I'm going to get something, as
Well,
opposed to serving each other in the relationship and being more coming to it from a compromise standpoint of, I can see the value in that, but that does not necessarily mean that now I get to go get a purchase that matches that same thing. Like, how do you navigate that?
yeah, and sometimes part of it is we think of compromise as this or that, when it would release a ton of pressure if we thought about of what comes first then next. Because sometimes if one of and I'll give this example from my real life in my own marriage. I wanted to go back to graduate school. And what that might have meant for our family is either me taking a pay cut or dropping out of the workforce for a couple of years and maybe taking on some debt depending on which school I went to and how I went to that school, right? And so as we were having that conversation, it wasn't about, well, if you go to school, we can't do this. It's like, okay, well, if that means that if school happens now, this other thing we've been talking about will happen at this point instead. So thinking about of what order do we do things so that we all get what we need. We just can't do all those things at one time. And that can relieve a lot of the pressure because it's instead of it saying, well, you got to go to grad school and I wanted to get a boat because it was about the same price.
Yeah.
Right? It's about, oh, okay, you go to grad school and then once you're working in the new job that should pay you way more for a couple years, then we put the boat in the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. So, and even from the get go, and I should have asked this maybe when we started our conversation, is just because money is such an emotional thing
Mm,
for a lot of us. And when most couples, and I've taught couples workshops, and I'll even ask them, I'll have them raise their hand, like, how many of you have gone through like a personal finance class or any sort of personal finance education together, either before you got married or after you got married? And hardly anyone raises
mhm,
their hand. So a
yeah.
lot of people, a lot of couples are almost getting a late start to this whole financial conversation. So from a starting out point, how do couples keep like that emotion out of it? Where, a lot of people, you look at the statistics right now, the majority of people are living
Mhm,
paycheck to paycheck. The majority of
mhm,
people say money is their number one source of financial stress.
yep,
47% of people recently just came out and said money is the number one
that's right.
cause for their decline in mental health. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. When we start, coming together as a relationship or couple, like, how do you keep all of that yucky stuff you're feeling about your finances out of it so you can focus on the more proactive actions that need to happen?
You actually don't because it turns out money ain't math. It's not. Money ain't math, right? If money was math, then a 3rd grade 8-year-old could do money. Money ain't math. And
Yeah.
so part of it is coming to the table with, "Hey, I don't know if you know, but the way I grew up, I never sat down and talked about money in a way that was productive or happy or peaceful, and so it's gonna take me some practice, but I really wanna do this because if we can have good conversations and make plans, then we'll get further and we won't be fighting about it. I don't wanna fight about money. I saw my parents fight about money, or I saw my neighbors fight about money, and I don't want to be that couple, but us not talking about it isn't the solution either. Another piece that I think is something really simple that people can do is think about where you have your best conversations
Mm.
and think about the place, the time, and the setting for having these conversations that are a little more difficult. And the number one place, and followed by a very close second, is in the car. And this works in relationships, it works with parents and teenagers, it works with grown-ups and their parents. And the reason why the car is such a magical place for these hard conversations is because you're in a car, so you're close in proximity, you're physically close. There's an intimacy there because you're physically close to one another. The car is moving forward, right? So there's something about that motion, like, okay, we can get through this conversation just like we got through that highway, we got through that traffic. And you're not looking at one another. And so when that something said that stings or hurts, you have both the opportunity to take that deep breath, listen, see how it feels before you react. And, or if you need to, you can look out the side of the window and say, I can't believe this just said that to me. Without, but without the conflict, right? Right. I can get it out. I can make my face, I can grimace, I can growl like kind of under my breath. But the conversation does not have to stop because I didn't do it in your face, right? I got out the frustration, I got out that initial emotional response, but we were able to continue the conversation because I got it out and said, "Okay, well, tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way, or why do you think that was an okay thing to say?" What am I missing? Why is this coming up as a conflict? Like, I want to understand because you're together, you're in a closed space, you're in a literally moving forward, right? But you're not looking at one another. So it takes a lot of that pressure and that risk and that conflict down.
Yeah.
And the close second to that is on a walk. Same idea, right? You've got some physical movement forward, you're with each other, but you're not looking at one another.
Yeah. I love that. Those are such great tips because I would agree. I think where most people make their mistakes is they immediately start talking about the numbers or what the other person did. And I love that you bring up like find something fun to do while you do it. It takes a lot of that pressure off. I love that. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about consistency? Because I find a lot of couples struggle with this. Like they're in a moment, something happened, a crisis, whatever happened, and all of a sudden they're both looking at each other like, we got to do something about this. And they'll jump to action. Hey, we got to do something. They'll talk about it. But then all of a sudden, the emotion or whatever that feeling they were feeling during that event kind of goes away because the event is now in the past and they move on.
Mhm.
Right. And all of a sudden, it stops. Consistency
Yeah.
stops. They stop talking, they stop discussing, and it's like almost like this constant fits and starts. Do you give couples any recommendations of like, you need to be like talking about this X amount of times to make sure? And what kind of tips can you share with couples
Yes.
to keep that consistency going?
And I highly recommend a date night, and you might have to do a couple of these per month because one might be just a date where you're really having fun and maybe you're on a date with friends or your sister-in-law, right? But you have to have at least one date every month where you're sitting down and talking about the money, but not just the money, because this is the part where it's actually helps, the calendar, because your calendar has a time and a money consequence. And so if the money part is hard, guess what? You can look at the calendar for the next month or two and say, okay, which sport is starting if you have kids? What bills are due? Do we have any birthdays or celebrations that we're going to have to pay for? Oh, we're traveling soon. How are we paying for that again? Do we have a hotel? Are we driving? And so you can start actually with your life, which feels like a nice way to ease into it, and then add the dollars amounts to it because you've talked about your life and now you add the money piece. And that feels way easier than talking about, we don't have enough money for this. Wait, 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 wait. But look, we're having a really beautiful life. Can we start there and then figure the money part off second? Because that feels like it hurts less.
Yeah, yeah, those are great tips. What about a situation where you have a partner who's like, I really want to get on a plan with our finances. Like, I see the need for this. I want security in my life. I want peace. I don't want to feel much stress. I want to plan for our future. I want that house. I want to be able to take that trip. But then you got the partner who's just dragging their heels, right? And they
Mhm.
don't really want anything to really do with it. Like, how does a couple and the reason I ask this is because I find in more cases than not, couples are in this situation where you have one partner who is really serious and understands the importance of financial health, but the other one is just, you only live once. I'm going to spend it now and I don't care. Like, how do you get that other person to like come to the table and say, okay, I'm willing to try some of this stuff? Because I find that couples who are really into it, they really struggle with getting their partners on board.
Well, part of it is you have to make it really easy for the other person. So what that means, the person who's totally engaged and wants to do it, they're going to have to do most of the work probably for a couple years, right? Because the other person who's like in YOLO or I don't want to deal with that or it'll all be fine or aren't you so happy that like our bills are paid? Why are you so worried about it? We're fine, right? And the other person's like, yeah, our bills are paid mostly, but I'd like to have some money in the bank and I'd like to be a little bit less stressed about whether we'll pay them every month. Like that person has to take on a little bit more of the work and to show the partner who is resistant like that actually these things will make our lives easier. So remember when that thing came up, that car repair, and we were able to swipe the credit card and pay it right off, and it was like just inconvenient for like 2 days versus us, being late to work and having to figure out who was going to drive who, and your boss got upset. Like, see how smooth that was? I'd like everything that comes up for us to be that smooth. So, can I get you to do this? Can I get you to do this? Or if you don't want to deal with it at all, let's move to a joint bank account. Let me be the CFO of our family for 6 months. For 6 months, you can look at everything, you can see everything, you'll see everything I'm doing, but let me put us on a path. And if after 6 months things are not better, then we'll either go back to where we were or do something different. But let me try and see if you like it.
Yeah. Those are all great tips. I think the other one is, like you mentioned, you have a book. I think
Mm.
I found that this has been a great tip too, is find a third party,
Mhm.
because I feel like I always, in relationships where you're having that money conversation and you feel like the other person is like pointing the finger at you. Whereas
Mm.
opposed to if you listen to a third party, maybe you get on a podcast, maybe you read a book, maybe you both are willing to consume some sort of content that's related to finances. You begin to be able to have a conversation that's about what that person said,
Yeah.
not what about my partner said and made me feel bad for.
That's
Right?
right. That's right. And
Yes.
the thing about relationships is there are 2 relationships at play when we're talking about this stuff. It's not only the relationship you have with your partner, but the relationship you have with money, the relationship they have with money, and the relationship you all as a couple have with money.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so good.
so you gotta work on all of those things simultaneously, but I promise you, you can do it.
Yeah. Yep.
You can do hard things.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned from your childhood, and you mentioned like you started education early, you started working on money, you started learning about this stuff. Like, it's much bigger than just the couple, because a lot of us have what we call are these little children running
Oh,
around,
yeah.
right? We got these kids. And if you look at the education system in the United States, like a lot of our kids aren't really getting a lot of this basic financial literacy that can help us be successful in the world when we become adults. So, as parents and as partners, like, how does that begin to trickle down to our kids where we're beginning to do like the work that we're doing together now goes down to them? Can you provide just some quick little things that you
Yeah.
can do to start having some of these conversations with our kids about some of this stuff?
So, the first thing is pay attention to how you talk about money when your kids are in the room.
Mm.
When you're at the grocery store or the convenience store and they ask for something, what do you say? When you're in the car driving someplace and they say, "Oh, my friend just got this. Can I get it?" How do you respond? Right? Pay attention to what you are saying to your kids about money
Can I
and
stop you?
decide.
I wanna stop you right there real quick. What would be a negative financial mindset in that situation? They want
No,
something
we
at the
don't.
store, a friend has something. Give me an option again, give me an idea of what that would look
So,
like.
this happened to me the other day. My daughter wanted a unicorn stuffy because her best friend at school has a unicorn stuffy. "Mom, can I get the such and such unicorn stuffy?" "No, sweetie, that's not on our priority list right now." Or the one I use all the time is, "Oh, we didn't come to the store for that. Today we came to the store for trash bags and light bulbs. Remember I told you we were here for trash bags and light bulbs?" And so that way I get to communicate to her, "Oh, right now we are focused on this, or our priority is this." And so, no to that right now, not because we don't have it, not because we're broke, not because I'm tired of you asking for things, but because that's not why we're here right now. We're here for trash bags and light bulbs. And so, anytime you can give the no in a very gentle and way, or give the reason why it's a no right now and that it might not be a no forever, that helps that brain connection, like, not just go straight to shutdown mode as kids. And remember, and it's hard to remember depending on which stage of parenting you're in, your voice as that mom, as that dad, becomes their inner voice when they are
Yeah.
not in your house, when they're at school, when they're with their friends. And even if you don't think they're listening to you, let me tell you, they are listening to you.
Oh, yes.
So, pay attention to how you talk about things. And if you're stressed about money, you can say, "Hey, sweetie, I know when we talked about that the other day, I was maybe a little crabby. It's because I'm trying to solve a problem and I don't know how to solve it yet, but that's not for you to worry about. So sorry I was crabby."
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good, and I think, you know, I think for our kids, this was a driving and huge motivator for me of getting out of debt and becoming debt free was my first son, and realizing, wow, I'm like terrible with money,
Mm.
and he's gonna look at me as an example, and I don't want that for him. So there is this big mentality of, yes, you only live once. Yes, you enjoy life and all that, but at the end of the day, too, you have this tree that you're growing,
Mhm.
and you can either pass on negative values and all these negative things to them and have that cycle just repeat, or you can stop that from happening and say, we're going to do things differently.
Mhm.
Um, that is so good. So, Darla, I just want to say thank you so much. These have been some fantastic tips. Can you please share, like, you got a lot of resources and things out there. Like, where can people find you and find different information that you have out there?
Yes, so I wrote How to Afford Everything, so that's my website, howtoaffordeverything.com. If that's too much, if you go to darlabishop.com, it'll shoot you right over there too. And there, like you said, I have a ton of freebies because I want to be in a world, in a community, in a family where everybody's happy, whole, and a little bit rich. Because if I'm surrounded by that kind of people, then I've got a shot too. So I give a lot of stuff away because knowledge is power. And if you can figure this stuff out, which it is all figure outable, you're well on your way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here and spending some time with us. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, guys, if you want to pay off more debt, save more money, and you want to take better control of your finances and start seeing amazing results here in just as little as 30 to 60 days, all you have to do, head over to debtfreedad.com, click on the green button at the top of the page, and I'm going to show you how you can get started. As always, congratulations to all of you out there listening to Debt Free Dad who are taking a stand for your financial life and are wanting better. Hey, we get that getting out of debt isn't easy, but with our help and hopefully with your consistency and discipline, we promise you guys, this will be some of the best work that you guys do in your entire life. Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.